U.S. President Donald Trump has withdrawn his invitation for Canada's Prime Minister to join his Board of Peace that will oversee the Gaza peace deal. He made the announcement in a Truth Social post on Thursday, hours after introducing the group of leaders in Davos. Now, Trump did not explain why Mark Carney was no longer invited, but the Canadian Prime Minister received a standing ovation for his speech at Davos. In it, he warned of a rupture in the global order in the wake of U.S. policies. Trump, in his own speech in Davos, called Carney ungrateful. By the way, a permanent seat on Trump's Board of Peace comes with a $1 billion price tag. For more, let's bring in Daniel Levy, a former Israeli negotiator and president of the U.S. Middle East Project. He joins us from London. Daniel, where do I even begin? Let's start with your reaction to Trump's peace board, especially who's on it and who's not.
That was the best start that anyone could have made. Where indeed to begin, Asieh? At the moment, you have a very small cohort of the countries, the states on this planet, of the members of the UN who have agreed to join. I think many of them have agreed to join because they are managing and balancing their equities with the US president. Some are staunch allies who have received significant political support from President Trump. One can think of Argentinian President Milei, Hungarian Prime Minister Orban, the president of Paraguay, but that's a handful. I think if you were to ask the members of that board, who of you think this is a serious effort, it would shrink even further. And most, even of those invited, have decided to sit on the sidelines because what is this about? On a attempted serious level, this is an attempt to reassert American primacy at the expense of a multilateral order, at the expense of the existing institutional architecture, where we try and have common rules for how we operate on this planet. That's the serious side of it. But the less serious side of it, which seems to be more prominent, is this is the plaything of a petulant egomaniac. He's not going to reassert American primacy, and I don't think he's going to have his happy plaything either. But he could well do a lot of damage in the interim, and that's what people have got to look out for because, and I think this is the most important message, for almost all states and therefore people on this planet, having a set of rules which at least to some degree govern us, having an institutional architecture is so important. Most states rely on that, and he has tried to drive a tank through that.
Let me tell you what Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez said in declining President Trump's invitation. He said the board is outside the framework of the United Nations and has not included the Palestinian Authority. How can there be any serious discussion about the future of Gaza and the Palestinians in Gaza without a single Palestinian on this board? And by the way, Benjamin Netanyahu, who has an arrest warrant issued by the International Criminal Court, he was invited but couldn't come because he could have potentially been arrested.
Well, indeed, you have, as you say, a leader with an International Criminal Court arrest warrant against him as a member of a board. That's not a board most people would feel comfortable being in. This is not just designed for Gaza. I think it's important to note that in the charter of the board, what does that charter look like? It looks like someone of a child's age could have done this, went to ChatGPT and said, draw up something that reads like a charter, but it's really just for someone who has an exaggerated sense of their own self-importance because they're the sole arbiter of what goes on. In that charter, there's no reference to Gaza. So there's this confusion. The board is clearly supposed to play a larger role. And pay attention to something here. America has guaranteed that the UN is ineffective in many instances, particularly in the Middle East, particularly in preventing the crimes against Palestinians, because the United States abuses its veto. It then turns around and says, look, the UN can't do anything, so we need something else. Why can't the UN do anything? Because of, in more cases than not, because of you, America. So this is not going to solve Gaza. We have a president that says after 3,000 years we have peace. What peace? With all due respect, yes, we're all glad to see the killings in Gaza have dropped, but they haven't ended.
Yeah.
Every day Palestinians are killed.
Well,
Israel occupies 58%. The aid is not getting in despite the lies of the Kushner flip charts. So that's the reality.
Well, let me ask you about this whole little scuffle going on with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. Trump invited him, then decided to disinvite him. Of course, the same week, as you know, Carney got a rousing response to his speech on some of the points you and I are talking about right now. A blunt warning of a rupture in the global order caused by President Trump. Didn't mention President Trump by name, but everyone knew who he was talking to. So was this personal for Donald Trump, basically saying, sorry, you're no longer invited?
Is anything not personal for President Trump? So again, on the managing the unserious side of the ledger, this is like someone saying, you said something mean, you can't come to my party anymore. That was the Truth Social post regarding Mark Carney. On the serious side of the ledger, you had a Canadian leader, just think about this, who set out really what virtually everyone is thinking. That speech will be remembered. You had a Canadian leader who has just returned from a trip to China, telling the Americans next door, this is how the world is changing. We are going to try to preserve a multilateral-based, law-based, it's imperfect. I'm going to acknowledge those imperfections. We're going to have to build something new, but it's not going to be your thing. And the American attempt to reassert primacy through bullying is not going to work. It didn't work on tariffs with China, and it seems that when the Europeans have stood up on Greenland, it won't work either. He can bully others, but everyone needs to club together because everyone could be the subject of that bullying.
Well, I wish we could continue our discussion. We're out of time. Daniel Levy, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Asieh.